I'm Jesse Barnum. I'm the president of 360Works. I'm the primary author of MirrorSync, some of our other products as well, Safety Net and Zulu. Um, I have spoken at a lot of the DevCon and Engage things that have happened. I used to travel in person to user group meetings to do presentations, and I really miss that. Um, like, it's kind of really convenient to get on Zoom, but it's also really pretty cool to like be in the same room as people and like go to lunch together or dinner or something like that. So if any of the user group meetings ever start doing in-person presentations again, let me know and we'll get together. Uh, I love any sort of outdoor activities, but my things that I enjoy the most are camping and motorcycles. And it's really weather's getting really nice here in Georgia, and so I'm looking forward to some motorcycle camping soon. That's my wife and I, Lisa, on the Blue Ridge Parkway on the right. So this is the slide I said I was going to skip over. So I'm going to just burn through this stuff really quickly. I will just point out a few things that are maybe not as well known, which is that MirrorSync is for a lot more than just FileMaker server and FileMaker client. We sync with all the databases you see on these bullet points here: Dynamo, Redshift, SQL Server, MySQL, Salesforce. So you can sync any of those things with any of those other things, as well as FileMaker Pro or Go. And FileMaker Pro or Go will also sync directly with any of those. So I'm going to call out Scott as an example. I'm pretty sure that if Scott is still doing it the same way, I think Scott is syncing MySQL with FileMaker Go. Is that right, Scott? Yeah. So and that I think the speed is actually quite good on that configuration. So yeah, MirrorSync can sync between pretty much anything that has an API or anything that has a JDBC driver. So even if you have databases that are not on this list, if they have JDBC support, which just about every database does, MirrorSync will sync with it. And so I've got a few examples of things that people are doing with MirrorSync. I've got a few server-server examples and a few client-to-server examples. So I'm not. So this is kind of a neat one. This is Wade Caldwell, who's a friend of mine and a former employee. He now runs a race car parts warehouse in Southern California. He's got 6 warehouses, and what he found is that they have a FileMaker system for doing all of it. Even though the databases are all in Southern California, it was actually noticeably faster to just put FileMaker Server in each warehouse. And so all 6 of them sync up with each other. So he's doing a 1 hub and 5 spokes so that everybody has a full copy of the warehouse database for pick and pack stuff. One of our really early MirrorSync customers for Salesforce, I think probably our first Salesforce customer, they do African safari tours. They use Salesforce for all of their leads and CRM stuff. And then when they get somebody that wants to go on a safari, they use MirrorSync to sync all of that into FileMaker Server to actually assemble the tour package with the hotels and the itinerary and everything like that. Chicago Public Schools is the one that I've personally been the most involved with. I work closely with Molly Connolly on that. They use MirrorSync to sync FileMaker Server to DynamoDB. And the reason that we picked DynamoDB to sync with is because they have a web application that needs to be accessed by 40,000 simultaneous users. And that's pretty amazing when you think about it, because I don't mean 40,000 like a day. I mean like literally 40,000 people hitting buttons at the exact same time as each other to like log in and see which programs their kids got into. And so the previous company that did it tried to do it with MySQL, that didn't work, melted down. They tried it with Oracle, that didn't work, that melted down. We did it with Dynamo and it was flawless. And they hired a benchmarking company to benchmark the performance with 40,000 simulated users on it. And the benchmarking report said speed is identical with 1 user or 40,000 users. So you can really use MirrorSync to leverage your FileMaker database with other non-FileMaker databases to use each tool for what it's really good at. And Dynamo is really, really good for high volume stuff. We've got a hosting company, 360Works, McDonald companies. They have offices in Texas and Illinois. They want, most of their people are in Illinois, but they wanted to make it so that everybody would automatically go to whichever server was closest to them. So we used Route 53 DNS failover on AWS to set that up for them. So, if you're in Wisconsin, you're going to go to the Illinois server. If you're in Alabama, you're going to go to the Texas server. And that all happens automatically by AWS measuring the latency between you and the 2 servers. And then that's configured with failover. So if either Texas or Illinois goes down, the DNS will reroute all the users to the other server. And when that server comes back up, the DNS will reroute them all to the server that's closest to them. So pretty neat stuff with failover and replication there. Let's talk about a few client to server configurations. One is YWAM, Youth with a Mission. This is not run by, I keep saying that. Marty Thomason, who's another FileMaker developer in the Atlanta area that I'm friends with, he volunteered to build a FileMaker database for this team of doctors that has a hospital ship. And they sail around the coast of Papua New Guinea going ashore to offer medical services for like dental and vision. And they need databases with them for all the patient records, but there is no internet, there's no cell, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no nothing. They're just in, villages. And so they take all the stuff with them onto shore. They sync all of that with FileMaker Pro, and then they sync the FileMaker Pro databases to a ship-based FileMaker server when they get back to the ship. And then they sync again between that ship-based FileMaker server and a shore-based FileMaker server in Sydney, Australia. So I was really happy to be involved with that because it's a really cool, worthwhile project that they're doing. I think this is our largest single user of MirrorSync. They have 2,500 devices. This is IMS, and they have a vertical market system for first responders that when they go to a fire or an ambulance or something like that, and they put somebody in the back of the ambulance, they are using the IMS FileMaker database to key in all the patient's vital statistics while they're driving in the ambulance with going in and out between cell zones. And when they get to the hospital, as they come off the back of the ambulance, they're syncing that to a server that is then accessible for the doctors in the hospital, as they wheel the patients in. Someone who's helped me a lot with beta testing and early development with MirrorSync 7 is Chris Rogers. His company is Tour Pro. They do dance competitions for over 500 dance schools around 5 countries. And so in a typical week, they'll have about 10,000 syncs from 5 countries all around the world, syncing with Chris's servers that he runs in-house in Southern California. And so, and then the last one that I'm going to point out is really like a lot of the ones that I've been talking about are like really kind of exotic, cool stories and stuff. This is just a very day-to-day thing, but I wanted to include it. So EPB Office Products, they're a small business. They have Cindy is the owner of the company, and she's based in Canada. She travels all over the world with her husband for vacation, and she wants to be able to keep track of everything that's going with her staff in Canada who is doing inventory and managing orders. And so we set them up with MirrorSync so that they could just take a copy of the database on their laptop. And I just talked to her a few weeks ago. They were in Sweden and they're getting ready to go to Hawaii. And so she just travels with her offline copy of the database and syncs it periodically to know everything that's going on. So that's a very I think that's something that many of us can just relate to that. And also it's part of the reason I put it on the slide is because I wanted to give an example of the fact that you can use MirrorSync for free, completely free with one device. So Cindy only has one device. She has her laptop computer. One device comes free with MirrorSync. So she's not even having to pay to use MirrorSync with that. And we want that. We want you guys to use MirrorSync, with the owner of the business or with a salesperson who needs to travel or for yourself or for your own development purposes. We want you to use it that way. And then, if you need it for more than one device, then there's that's when we have a charge for that. So those are just some things that people are doing with MirrorSync. I'm going to talk about what's new in MirrorSync 7. So MirrorSync 7 came out in July 3rd. And we had a few hiccups. I think we're at MirrorSync 7.04 right now, and that seems pretty solid. I haven't had any kind of major things that I've had to do in the last month or two, so that seems like that's all going well. Let's talk about what is new in MirrorSync 7. If you've used MirrorSync 6 and earlier, these are the things that are going to be different from what you might be used to. We focused on 3 main areas: easier deployment to users, making it faster, and making it a little bit more developer friendly with, just like making it so that, you'll see when I get to some of these demos. The sync history database in particular is kind of cool. So let's talk about easier deployment to users. I think a lot of these I have demos for, so I'm going to skip over some of them. Let's see. Well, I'll just mention them and then I'll dive into more detail as I get to each demo. So the first one is Well, okay, the first one I know I have a demo on. I'm going to leave it alone. The iOS SDK deployment is really quite cool. And it really opens up new avenues for where you can use MirrorSync and where you can use FileMaker that you couldn't use it before. Um, we have now support for email notifications on server-side initial syncs. I think if I had to pick one feature that my customers have been the most excited about, it's the second bullet point, the server-side initial syncs with the email notifications. I'll show you that in more detail. We now ship a launcher file with MirrorSync. So instead of having to give your users a URL that requires 9 clicks for them, there's just 2 clicks to open a launcher file, and the launcher file automatically downloads your solution file. The launcher file is really small. It's like 850 kilobytes. So you can easily just attach it to an email. It's really, really simple for users. They don't have to know how to do anything to just tap the icon of the launcher file. And then there's one more button for them to click, which is open in FileMaker Go. And then it'll pop open that launcher file. The launcher file will download your solution, and then they'll be up and running with your database solution, and they'll be ready to sync. So that's going to be a lot simpler for a way to get offline copies to your users. Lastly, the launcher file has another nice benefit, which is that historically it's been really challenging to support multi-file solutions with MirrorSync. It's not that MirrorSync won't sync multi-files. It's that it's been really hard to find an answer for how to, if you have like, let's say you've got a separation model and you've got a UI file and a data file, and there's not a nice, convenient way to get those 2 files onto users' iPads. It's easy with a laptop because you just send them a zip file and they expand it and they're ready to go. But there's no built-in zip extraction feature on iOS or iPad OS. And so with the launcher file, you just send them the one launcher file as an attachment, and the launcher file will download all the multiple files that they need. So it's much easier and more feasible to work with multi-file solutions than it used to be. I do have demos for the speed improvements, so I'll come back into that and talk about that more. The developer features, the sync history database, I'm going to briefly demonstrate. One of the most common tech support tickets that I got doing MirrorSync support was, how can we see what syncs have run? How can we see who synced, who had problems, how long it took them, all of that kind of stuff. And frankly, there wasn't a very satisfying answer. I'm like, well, there's log files, but the log files are often huge. They're hard to read. And it's hard to get through the log file. So the sync history database is just a FileMaker database that you host on your FileMaker server in addition to your solution file. And after every sync, we just push a record to that history database, letting you know. Thank you. We just push a record to that database. My wonderful wife just brought me some water. So after every sync, we will push a record to that database. And so you, the developer, will be able to see who synced, all the detailed statistics about how long each table took, if they ran into errors, if any records are deleted, how many records are inserted, all that kind of stuff. I don't have a demo for the admin API, so I'm just going to talk about it for a moment. The admin API, basically, if you've used MirrorSync before and you've seen the config client, you know what the buttons are: export, import, change your license key, edit a configuration, download something. You can do all of those things in the config client. Now, we've created an admin API so that you now have a JSON API to do all the things that the config client can do. In fact, all we've really done is just expose the existing JSON API that the config client itself is using. So if you need to, for instance, enable or disable auto sync on your FileMaker, on your server sync, and you want to do that on some schedule, like let's say you want to have a schedule operation that you are going to turn off auto sync, deploy a new version, and then turn auto sync back on. That can all be scripted now through an admin API instead of having to go into the config client and click on the auto sync checkbox. Last point here, spent a surprising amount of time to rewrite all the documentation for MirrorSync. I thought that was going to be like a 2-hour deal. It turned out to be more like a 2-week deal. But the documentation is now, I think, quite good. It's all up to date. We never really overhauled it for version 6. We still had stuff from version 5. It's now all been rewritten to be current for version 7, and it's got better screenshots, better examples, and explains things more clearly. Let me show the sync history database first, and then I'll show the iOS SDK. So I've got a few pre-recorded demos, and I've also got the live demo that I'm going to do right now. So this is, and I'm going to keep this really short and sweet because I think you guys have seen, many of you have seen MirrorSync before, many of you know what it's used for. I'm just going to do some really quick stuff just so that if you maybe know what it is but haven't seen it, I just want you to see what it looks like. So what I've got here is FileMaker Starting Point. This is a free solution generously given away by Richard Carlton Consulting. It's EPB Office products that I mentioned in one of my previous slides. Their solution is built by customizing FileMaker Starting Point, and I find that it's a nice demo for MirrorSync because it looks nice and it's got some fairly typical business data in it that we probably all are familiar with. So I've got the Starting Point database. This is a hosted copy of the database, and you can tell a little trick here is that if you ever see save a copy as is disabled, that's how I always know whether I'm working on a hosted file or a local copy of the file. If it's disabled like this, it's a hosted copy. So I want to get a local copy. So I'm going to, here's what the MirrorSync config client looks like. So when you're creating your configurations in MirrorSync, this is how you do it. I've got two configurations, one for a tasks database and one for FileMaker Starting Point. I've already created a Starting Point configuration. You can see all of the tables that we're syncing over here. It looks a lot like the FileMaker relationship graph, but it's not. It's something that we created to simulate it. And if I want to distribute this to the users, I would either send them a launcher file. In this case, I don't have the launcher file ready, but I'm going to click Download Database. I'm going to click Create Link. I have a few different choices of what kind of link I want to do. In this case, I want a full copy, and I'm going to do my initial sync on the client device as opposed to a server-side initial sync. I have demos of doing the empty clone of the server-side sync later, which is why I'm doing this. I'm going to hit OK here, puts it on my clipboard, and now let me jump into my browser, pull it over to this screen, and I'll paste in that URL that it just gave me. And this is normal because I'm just running in development on my own laptop copy. So this is the download URL, and it just downloaded the Starting Point database. Here it is in my downloads folder. And so now I just got a copy of the FileMaker Starting Point database, and this is literally just this exact same file that I had on the server. And again, I know it's on the server because I've got save a copy as dimmed out. And now I've made a copy of it on my local computer, and I know that it's a copy because I wouldn't be able to do this menu option if it was on the server. So I know this is my local version of it, but it is nothing more than just an exact copy, all the same records and schema and everything like that. I'm going to start off by running a sync right here. This is my first sync that I've ever done, so it's going to ask me, for a descriptive name. This is just for logging purposes and showing up in the administrative screen. I'm going to re-enter my password. I only need to enter the password one time, and then MirrorSync will remember that for future syncs. It's going to run my initial sync, which is always going to be my slowest sync. That's where it's going to compare every table and every record in both databases to build kind of like a baseline so that moving forward, it can do incremental syncs. So that finished in 21 seconds. Now I'm going to go on the server. I'm going to create a new record. I'm going to come over to my offline copy. Notice I don't have my new record. I'm going to run my sync. This should be faster than the initial sync, and it does. It finishes in 6 seconds instead of 22. Here's my new record that I just got. I can pick whatever I want here, and I can sync. That's going to push those changes back up to the server. And then I want to show really quickly, I don't want to spend over amount of time because I think a lot of people have already seen MirrorSync before. I do want to show in case you haven't seen how merging works. So notice that all my changes got pushed up to there. I'm going to change my email address on the server. And I'm going to change my website address on the offline copy. And so now I've changed the same record in both places, but I've changed different fields. So let's try this and see what happens. What I'm expecting to happen is that the MirrorSync should be able to see which field was changed on which sides. And I always have a problem with FileMaker Starting Point does not commit records. I always have a problem forgetting to click off of the record when I'm working on it because it doesn't highlight anything to show me that I'm working on. So let me see if I can click off on those a few times. What we're seeing here is the conflict resolution screen. So this is what you see when you change the same record in both places. MirrorSync can tell that I changed this field on the server and this field on the client. So all I need to do is just hit finished. If I had actually changed the same field in both places, like let's say I had changed Jesse to Jason, but over here I changed it to Jeffrey. This would be in red, and I would pick left or right to pick which one that I wanted to keep. As it is, um, because I have the merging turned off, which I should have actually checked before I did this demo. I apologize for not being prepared enough. But because I have the feature to merge them turned off in development right now, it sees that I made this change. It sees that I made this change. I don't have to pick left or right because MirrorSync already knows which ones I've done. So I'm going to say finished, and then I'm going to come back and run my sync again. And now it updated both and it merged the email and the website. And if I had had the setting enabled in MirrorSync to enable merging, it wouldn't have even asked me. It would have just simply saw that nothing was in conflict between the two and just merged them with no prompt. So, and then I'm almost done here. I want to keep moving so I don't use up all the time. I'm going to delete the record in offline copy, and then I'm going to run my sync. And deletion tracking is actually one of the hardest things to do in a synchronization system because there's no record of the fact that that database was deleted. It's not like I flagged that it's deleted or added it to a list of deleted records. I just simply did a normal FileMaker deletion operation. MirrorSync keeps its own list of all the primary keys in every table for every device. So whenever there's fewer records than MirrorSync is expecting to see, it'll cross-index the list of records that are there now with a list of records it knows from last time, find the differences, assume that those were deletions, and then delete them from the other side of the sync. So it's not a terribly exciting thing to watch, but there's actually, it is quite a terribly challenging thing to make work. So that is the basic operations of MirrorSync. There's a lot more that I could talk about here about getting into relationships and container fields and stuff like that, but I just want to keep it simple and just show the basic operation of what your users should expect to see if they're using MirrorSync. All right, let's get into some speed demos. Oh no, I've got a cool demo on iOS SDK deployment. This is actually really fun. Okay, so this is a pre-recorded demo. I did this because I really didn't want to make everybody suffer through Xcode while I did this live. But what I'm going to show now, and I'll pause and resume the demo as I'm going. But what I'm going to show now is this Roswell Rescue application. This is kind of just a fake little application that we created in-house to demonstrate kind of what MirrorSync might potentially be used for. This is not using FileMaker Go. This is using the FileMaker iOS SDK, taking the launcher file that comes with MirrorSync and packaging it with the iOS SDK into a standalone iOS app that can then be deployed using mobile device management like Jamf, for instance, or put on the public app store. And so your users, if you deploy this way, your users don't have to download FileMaker Go as a separate thing to use your solution. So let me let this run and you can kind of I'll just talk through it as we go. So I'm opening the Roswell Rescue application. Now notice that it says downloading. What it's doing at this point is the launcher file is actually downloading the real application. It's so you don't embed your application into the iOS SDK. You deploy just the launcher into the iOS SDK, and the launcher has that same download URL that I showed before embedded inside of it. And so the first time they run this application, it'll download your solution. So the solution is, the point of this demo is not that this is a great application. It's not, but it's basically, the idea is that this is a pet rescue application. These are often held in outdoor events. You probably don't have Wi-Fi. You may or may not have cell signal. So it seems like a good use case for MirrorSync, that we want these multiple volunteers to each have their own phone or iPad, and they're going to be able to take all this adoption information and then they're going to be able to sync it. So when we run the sync, again, it's my initial sync, so I enter that in. It pushes all that stuff up, and it writes it to the server. Look at this message carefully. There's something that's interesting about it. I'm going to give everybody like 5 seconds to look at this, then I'm going to say what it is. Hub node MySQL sync adoptions added one. Notice the MySQL there. It's not FileMaker Server. So this is actually a vertical market application being deployed, not FileMaker Go to FileMaker Server, not iOS packaged app to FileMaker Server, but iOS packaged app to MySQL. And this feels to me like this is potentially a really powerful deployment option. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it as I keep going. So let's let this continue to run. So now I'm jumping over to FileMaker Go to make some development changes. So let's say that my customer says, it's too hard, it's too easy to hit the delete button. Everybody's hitting the delete button instead of the pencil button. They're right next to each other. People's fingers are fat. Let's make this over to the side. So fine. We'll move the delete button. Let's change the color so it's not quite so obnoxiously red and attention grabbing. And then comes the fun part. I'm going to go into the field definitions. I'm going to go to the MirrorSync table. I'm going to go to the field called database version. And I'm going to change this database version from 1.0 to anything else, in this case 1.1. Now I'm jumping back to my mobile solution. I'm running a sync. The sync finishes quickly. I didn't make any changes. And now it comes up saying there's a new database version available named 1.1. And that's just from me doing this change in the database version field. Keep in mind, we are not connecting directly to FileMaker Server. We're connecting to MySQL. But MirrorSync is talking also to FileMaker Server, where you keep your development copy of the file. So in every sync, it's syncing the data from the iOS packaged application to MySQL, and it's also referring to FileMaker Server to check and see if there is any change of the database version. If it is, it'll ask them what they want to do. They can certainly click not yet. If they've got a line of people, this is the wrong time for them to update the application, so they can just hit not yet and keep going, or they can click OK, and then the launcher file is going to kick in again. It's going to delete their file because it just ran a sync, meaning that they don't have any important data on their system anymore. And then it's going to download the new version. And you can see it's got the changes that we made with the new delete button off to the side. So let's kind of recap what just happened there. We took a FileMaker Go application that we built as developers, and we deployed it potentially on the App Store, or if it's a large corporate environment, maybe in a mobile device management. And we synced not with FileMaker Server, but with MySQL. And remember that bullet point slide that I showed you at the very beginning with all those different databases? That could have been Salesforce. It could have been Postgres. Could have been Oracle. Could have been anything. So if you have a customer, as a FileMaker developer, if you have a customer, a potential customer that says, hey, I hear you do software development. I've got the Salesforce system, and I'd really like there to be a mobile application version of that Salesforce system. I don't know if your guys' skill sets are much, there's probably people on this call who would know exactly what to do with that, but I don't personally. I'd be like, no, I'm sorry, I really don't build mobile Salesforce applications for mobile devices. But now with MirrorSync and the FileMaker iOS SDK, you can say yes to that. You can say, yeah, absolutely. You build it in FileMaker Go. You create a sync between FileMaker and Salesforce. You package it up with the iOS SDK runtime, which you don't even, that part's not a necessity. You could do it with FileMaker Go. Certainly it'll work just exactly the same. But I think it's especially cool that you can package it up with the iOS SDK, hand this packaged iPhone app to your customer and say, distribute this to your Salesforce salespeople out in the field, and they'll be able to download all of their leads and all of their activity and work on it with no network connection at full speed. And every time they click sync, it's going to push it all up to their Salesforce database or their FileMaker database or whatever they're using. And so that's really, really neat, I think. And then the one other thing that is really like maybe not intuitively obvious watching this demo is it's a real pain in the butt to distribute new versions of your application on the App Store, like a real big pain in the butt. So you've got to, first of all, go through the packaging process, which is not trivial. Then you need to send it to Apple for deployment and approval, which is definitely not trivial. And now imagine having to do that every time you make a minor change to your application, like what I just did. So with MirrorSync, not only are we allowing your users to sync all their data in the field, we're also managing that application deployment process, even in a packaged iOS SDK runtime. And the trick, the secret sauce of doing that is that launcher file. Because what we're doing is by embedding the launcher file with your IPA iPhone application instead of actually embedding your solution file, all the launcher file knows how to do is get the latest version of your file and put it on the device. So that's going to take care of all of your deployment and versioning issues if you decide that you want to deploy your application in the App Store. So I think that's quite cool. But let's keep moving and let's talk about some speed things and where MirrorSync said. This is the part that I really, really, really enjoy. I am an optimization weenie, and when I can make something run twice as fast, it makes me so happy. So with that in mind, we made a lot of changes to MirrorSync to make certain operations tremendously faster. The first is, and the first two bullet points are kind of similar variations of each other, but slightly different. We now compare the record contents, not just the modification timestamps, when we're trying to figure out which records to sync. So if you just modified 1,000 records by updating, maybe you had, let's say for instance, you got an invoice database, an invoice table, and it has related line items. And let's say that you run a nightly script that goes through and sets the total amount of the invoice equal to the sum of all of its line items. Hopefully you would have a script trigger that would do that so it would happen as it's done, but I've seen a lot of databases that don't do that. So you have this nightly script that runs and you run it on the entire set of 100,000 records, and every night you run it on 100,000 records and maybe 50 of them actually get changed to some different value than what they were previously. But all 100,000 have a new modification timestamp. In MirrorSync 6, it would have looked at that timestamp, it would have said, okay, great, 100,000 records are changed, and it would sync 100,000 records. With MirrorSync 7, we're going to say, okay, 100,000 records changed. Let's get a hash of the actual contents of the record and compare it to the contents of the record from last time. Oh, well, it matches for 999,950 of these records. But for these 50 records, it doesn't. So we're just going to sync these 50. So that can make your database tremendously faster. In my kind of contrived examples, I've measured it at 18 times faster. And that's really could be more or less just depending on how many records you have. A similar thing, but slightly different, is container fields. So let's say that you have changed the database, you have changed the tables, and you've made changes to the to a field, but you also got, maybe you've got 30 text fields and 5 container fields all in the same table. MirrorSync 6, if you changed any of those 30 text fields or the 5 containers, it would sync all 35 fields, 30 text fields and 5 container fields. In MirrorSync 7, we're always going to sync the non-text fields. If anything changed, we're going to sync all 30 fields. But for each of those 5 containers, we're going to look at each container field and say, did this one change? Did this one change? Did this one change? And we're going to identify from the hash which containers don't match the previous time that you did it, and only grab those ones and only sync them. So this is a really common thing that we run into a lot, where syncs are slow because somebody has a whole bunch of container fields on their job table and they change the status of the job from active to complete, and they run their sync, and now it syncs all of that. It syncs the status change, but it also syncs all the photos that they took, even though the photos didn't change. So MirrorSync 7 is much smarter about that. We've got deferred loop flushing, which is a little bit esoteric and not an easy thing to demo, but if you guys were paying attention to the release notes in FileMaker 20.3 and later, there's a new mode that they added so that when you're doing a loop, the looping script, I'm sure you've noticed that when you do a loop script, there's a flush thing, and you can set it to always, deferred, or never, maybe. I'm forgetting the options. But when we can safely do it, and that's kind of a major caveat, and I won't go into the details unless somebody's really curious about it. But if we can safely do it, we set it to deferred mode. And we've seen like multiple times faster syncs if we use deferred loop flushing when we're writing large batches of records. More kind of just boring to other people, exciting to me things, non-blocking writes to internal sync database. We have an internal sync database that has metadata about every record in every person's database. MirrorSync 6 would write a record, wait for that to finish, write another record, wait for that to finish. So if you had 100,000 records you were syncing, we did 100,000 writes waiting for each one to finish. Now we just write 100,000 records at once, and they just finish when they finish, and we move on and keep doing other stuff. So that helps speed a lot. Downloading an empty clone, tremendously faster. They added a new feature in FileMaker Server now that when you can request a clone only, it used to be that you could request a backup and a clone. but all we really want for initial downloads in many cases is an empty clone. So we're now utilizing that new feature in FileMaker Server. So I have a real customer that I was actually working with this weekend. It took 40 minutes to download an empty clone with MirrorSync 6 with no changes and anything but just MirrorSync 7. It's now 8 seconds instead of 40 minutes. So that's like 300 times faster. And so the last bullet point, I think, is maybe the most interesting one because it's the only one that's like a very real database. Not the only one. It's one of the only real ones where it's not just me doing a simulated benchmark. This is a real customer's database. The customer is called OneSource, and they provide home medical therapy and nursing home medical therapy. And they've got a 33 gigabyte database. It's got 136 tables. They don't sync all of those tables, and they have record filtering so that not everybody's getting all 33 gigabytes. But with MirrorSync 6, their initial syncs were about 28 minutes, which was not bad. They were fine with 28 minutes, but they were super, super happy when we switched them to MirrorSync 7, and without making any changes to any of the code or the scripting or the filtering or anything like that, just by switching from MirrorSync 6 to 7, their initial syncs dropped from 28 minutes to 6 minutes and 48 seconds. And that's a combination basically of all of these above bullet points, with the non-blocking writes and the FileMaker scripting optimizations for text concatenation and the deferred loop flushes and everything like that. So they saw 4 times speed improvement just by switching the versions. So I've got a few quick little demos that I'm going to do to just show you what this looks like. So the first demo I'm going to do here is the one where we do a replace operation. And this is the life notes data. This is the OneSource database that I was just talking about. So I've got this CPT field, and I'm going to do a calculated replace, and I'm going to replace it just with itself. So this is a little bit contrived, but it's kind of representing the example I gave about the invoice and the line items. So all of these modification timestamps are going to change, but the records themselves are not going to change. The contents of the records don't change. And this is why I'm doing this a pre-recorded demo, so I can show you side by side MirrorSync 6 and 7. I've got MirrorSync 6 on the right, MirrorSync 7 on the left. In hindsight, I should have flipped that so that the newer one was on the right. But the new, faster MirrorSync 7 is running on the left side of your screen, and MirrorSync 6 is running on the right side. This is a real live thing that I did with both 6 and 7, and I'm going to just click the sync button at the exact same time on both of them. And so the scripts are the same, the configurations are the same. MirrorSync 7 finishes in 3.813 seconds. And MirrorSync 6 is actually doing stuff on the right, but you'll notice that MirrorSync 6 says updating 250 records in the MS coding table. That I'm not going to make you guys suffer through this. I think I wrote down how long this takes. Yeah, that takes 70 seconds on the right. And we could sit here for 70 seconds and watch it because it's actually not frozen. I don't have the video paused. This is what MirrorSync 6 looks like. It's just updating the 250 records because it doesn't know to check the contents. It's just going by the modification timestamp. So what you can see on the left is that there was actually hardly anything for us to change. It was just a couple of activity records, which are just audit log tables. And so eventually MirrorSync 7 will finish, but I'm just going to skip to the next demo and just trust me, it takes 70 seconds. So this is about 18 times faster in MirrorSync 7. Oh, here it goes. It's almost done. There we go. So notice that if we look here, it modified 2,204 records in that MS coding table, which we didn't have to do in MirrorSync 7 because we compared all the field contents to see that they already match. For my next demo, I'm going to show that container hashing thing. So I've got this image database. I've got 204 records in it. These are photographs that are taken. And I've got this type field. And I'm going to change all 204 records from image to photo. Now, this is not like the last demo I just did because I am actually making a real change. The last one, I changed the value to itself. Now I'm changing it to different things. So there is a legitimate need to sync all of these things. So again, I'm going to start the same thing running. I'm going to have MirrorSync 7 running on the left, MirrorSync 6 running on the right. I'm going to click the sync button at the exact same time. Here they go. And so both of them have to write all of the records, all 240 records, or 204 records, I'm sorry, from the client to the server in this case, because I made the change on the server and I'm pushing them to the client. So you'll notice that MirrorSync 7 finished. It did modify 204 records. If you look carefully there, you'll see modified 204. And it took 7.255 seconds to do that because it skipped all the container fields. That's the critical part. It modified the records, but it compared each container field to see if it matched what it had been before. It's using that, if you looked at FileMaker, that get container attribute function, there's a hash. Um, I forget the actual string that you pass into the name of it, but there's a string that you can pass into the get container attributes to get an MD5 hash of the container. And so we compare that on every sync. And if it matches, then we just skip the container field. So in this case, this will finish on the right side in 96 seconds. And again, I'm going to let that just go and you can see updating 25 records on the right side in sync content management because it's writing all those, not just the text fields, but the container fields. So MirrorSync 7, far more efficient when we're dealing with anything where you've got mixed tables of text and container fields because in many cases, we can just skip the container fields. So let's talk about, moving on to a new topic here, server-side initial syncs with email notifications. This is the one I mentioned about, I think is our most popular feature in MirrorSync 7. I've gotten really good feedback from people. This is actually the last thing I added to MirrorSync 7. I almost didn't do this one. I was like, oh, I've got so many speed improvements. Things are so much better. I'm really, really glad I added this one at the end. It was the last thing to make the cut for version 7, and it's been very popular. So let me just show you what this is doing. So MirrorSync has a server-side initial sync feature. And so instead of downloading the database to your device and doing the initial sync on your device, remember the initial sync is always going to be the slowest sync. We do that initial sync on the server. So we make an extra copy of the database on the server. But the initial sync on server feature is where that initial sync runs on the server. The server is generally going to be faster than your offline device. Not only because just the CPU is more powerful than what you're probably running on your phone, although the phones are pretty fast now. Not only is the CPU probably faster, but there's also no network overhead because it's all running on the same box. So that it just makes that initial sync a lot faster to run on the server. We could do initial syncs on the server on MirrorSync 6. So this is the initial sync on server concept is not new to 7. That was already there in 6. The new part is this text I'm going to read you right here. You may optionally enter an email address to receive a notification when your file is ready. Leave this blank if you prefer to download immediately in the browser as soon as the file is ready. And then I put in my email address as demo@360works.com, and then I click sync and notify. And so now we've got that initial sync running on the server on both it's running on that left side, and we've got a sync running not on the server on the right side in MirrorSync 6. So look what happened in MirrorSync 7 on the left. I didn't have to have my database open. I could have closed my iPad, put it to sleep, disconnected from the network, gone into airplane mode, gone on a flight to San Diego, and that initial sync would have been running on the server the entire time. That's the big difference. MirrorSync 6, if you lost the network connection at any point, even though the sync was happening on the server, once you lose the network connection, there's no way for you to download it, and so that it gets canceled. With MirrorSync 7, we'll run that initial sync on the server. You can be doing anything you want with or without your iPad or your iPhone, and we'll just send you an email link when it's done. So the email link is right here. Use this link to download a copy. So the server is now running that initial sync. And when it's done, we will receive an email, and the iPad on the left, there's the email. So the initial sync is done. And here's my email saying your offline copy is ready. I click that link, I download it. And now my initial sync is already finished. I can flip through the records here to prove that, I have all of the data. And now I'm going to run my first sync. And this is not an initial sync at this point. It's an incremental sync because the initial sync already ran on the server. So this incremental sync should be very fast. So it finishes in 1.4 seconds. Meanwhile, on the right side, MirrorSync 6 is still chugging away on trying to finish that initial sync. So not only do we get the speed benefits on MirrorSync 7, we also so it's faster in general, but in addition to being faster, we don't have to sit there with our iPad or iPhone open, waiting for it to finish. We can actually just close it, take it with us, and then we can check our email whenever we're ready. And so this eventually finishes on the right side in 111 seconds. So I think that's the end of my demos. I've got a few slides, and then I hope you guys have some questions because I feel like I've been going really fast, and so I feel like I've got plenty of time. So if you've got questions, hit me now, or I'll be at a Q&A slide in just a second. So the first thing is, how do you get onto MirrorSync 7? And that's really easy. You just run this, you run the installer. The nice thing is your existing offline copies will still work. Your MirrorSync 6 offline copies that your users already have are going to continue to work. You don't need to have everybody throw away their copies and get new copies when you upgrade to MirrorSync 7. Funny little story about that. We intentionally did not change the names of the scripts. So the scripts still say MirrorSync 6. You're not doing it wrong. If you go to set up MirrorSync 7 and the scripts are called MirrorSync 6, we did it that way on purpose because we wanted to make it backwards compatible with the old files and the old devices. And so by doing it that way, you can upgrade to MirrorSync 7 on the server like immediately, and you're not going to mess up any of your users running in the field. Your configurations will stay there, your sync data will stay there, your existing offline copies are going to work. Now, this last bullet point is saying you're not going to get a lot of the new features I just showed you. If you want to get those new features like the container hashing, like comparing the modification contents instead of just the timestamps, like the looping flush mode, those things all require the new version of the script. So the old script is going to work, but it's not getting all of the benefits. So to get the benefits, replace the MirrorSync 6 worker script on your hub database with the new MirrorSync 6 script that comes with MirrorSync 7. Sorry about the confusion in the naming. I promise it's better that way. Replace your script on the server. That's also still going to work, even though your offline copies are running the old script and the new server, and the server's running the new script. It's still going to work. Everything's going to sync okay. And then distribute the new version to your users, either one at a time or by changing the database version field to do them all at once, and then they'll get that new version. So they can continue to use their old offline copies for as long as they want, as long as they understand that getting the new version, a new offline copy is going to give them all of the speed benefits in MirrorSync 7. So that's the upgrade process. MirrorSync 7 is available now. It came out July 3rd. You can see everything. All the videos that I just showed you are available at mirrorsync.com. It is, like I talked about with Cindy, with EPB Office products, it is free for one device. That's not a limited version. There's no expiration on it. There's no feature limitations. It's the full-blown MirrorSync thing. It's just one device is free. If you want more than one device, the additional devices are priced anywhere between $4 to $7.50 per month, depending on how many of them you're purchasing. We do have special pricing that's even less than $4 a device a month if you want to get a 1,000 device bundle, like if you're doing something like IMS is doing with their like first responder database. I think especially with the option to build, to use the iOS SDK to bundle this on the App Store, we needed a way to make this cost effective if you're distributing it to a large number of users. So we've got a pretty cost effective bundle for 1,000 or more devices. So just contact us if you're interested in that. We simplified the pricing a lot for our server-to-server syncs. We used to have all different prices depending on what kind of servers you were syncing. We've done away with all that. And now we've just standardized the price is $115 per month. That doesn't matter if it's FileMaker to FileMaker, FileMaker to MySQL, MySQL to Oracle, SQL Server to Dynamo. It's all $115 per month per pair of servers. So if you wanted to sync one FileMaker server with 3 other FileMaker servers around the world, that would be 3 times $115 per month. 360Works offers FileMaker hosting. That's a separate service that doesn't necessarily have to do directly with MirrorSync, but we do include MirrorSync hosting at no extra cost with our hosting. You still need to purchase the license for MirrorSync, but we're not going to also charge you anything additional in order to host that on your servers. And we have a dedicated box that we do all of our MirrorSync hosting on. So the MirrorSync runs on a big Linux box. And then FileMaker server can be just dedicated to doing FileMaker server stuff and not having to also be a sync box. If you are a Claris partner, which I think a lot of the people on this call that I saw are Claris partners, we have a not for resale bundle. It's a very, very nominal price. Just contact us if you'd like to get that. And what so that's basically, it's our portfolio bundle, which is all of our products, including MirrorSync, for a nominal price for Claris partners, because we really want you guys to have easy access to try this out. The main limitation on it is it's not for your clients. It's not for you to sell to your clients. It's not for you to host for your clients. It's really just for you to use it for your own business purposes. So please keep that in mind if you decide to take advantage of that. We also have reseller pricing for Claris partners. So if you have, if there's any of our products that you want to recommend to your customers, we want to make sure that you get a commission on that. So contact us to get reseller pricing so that you can make a commission on that. Any questions that you have, you can ask me now. You can send an email to support@360works.com. And then the last thing on this slide is that if all of this sounds cool, but you don't really feel like learning how to do it, just let us know. And we can do all the integration and the configuration for you if that's easier. All right. And that's all the end of my slides. Does anybody have questions that I didn't address?
There's one question in the chat. If you first copy the RC data folder from a hub FMS server to a spoke FMS server, doing the initial one-way syncing from FMS hub to an FMS spoke, does the initial sync evaluation of container data recognize the container field data has not changed and ignores the container data?
Okay, really good question. Unfortunately, the answer to that one is no, and I'll explain why. MirrorSync needs to, in order for that to work, MirrorSync needs to compare the current hash of the container with the previous hash of the container. MirrorSync only knows the previous hash of the container if it wrote that container. So if the containers are already there on the destination, MirrorSync doesn't know what the hash of their content is. So basically, another way to say that is MirrorSync will always copy the container field the first time that the record is modified because MirrorSync has nothing previous to compare to. It will then compare the hashes on future syncs because now it knows what the record originally was and it has a baseline to compare to. But it will, I still recommend doing that. MirrorSync will, if you copy over on if you're doing a server-to-server sync and you copy over, I'm assuming that you copy over your FMP12 files plus all of your RC data, external container storage, from the hub to the spoke. That's still a good idea to do that because MirrorSync will see that it's already there and it'll see the timestamps match and it will not copy that record. So it's a good thing to do. I think your question specifically was, okay, now what if you modify a record on the hub or the spoke, will it write with that container data to the other side? And the first time you modify it, yes, it will copy it over, even though it matches what's already on the other end of the destination, because MirrorSync has never actually written that container before. So MirrorSync has no history on what it used to be. I hope that answered that question. It is a lot of work for the server. Yeah, that's a balancing act. It's a good question. On the one hand, having everybody run the device, the initial sync on their device takes advantage of all those 50 devices, because they've all got, those iPads that your users are using, they've all got fairly powerful processors. So you're basically distributing that work among 50 processors. On the other hand, you're also having, I know that the way, I'm pretty sure that the way your system works, you distribute empty clones. So it's having to, oh, you're not. Okay. Yeah, so for the pre-filled spoke, I think that if that's the way you're doing it, I would say do the initial sync on the device because they already have all the record data. There's no noticeable, there's not enough data moving back and forth for the network speed difference to matter that much. Let's pretend for a moment that you were, in case anybody else is interested in that question, let's pretend for a moment that you were just going to distribute empty files to your users. And their first sync was going to populate all of the contents of that. That's where I think you would see a very big performance improvement of running that initial sync on the server because it's going to populate all of that record without having to transfer anything over the network. It's doing it all locally. And then when it's finished, then it will just stream the finished file to them over the network. But I think in your case, because you're already pre-populating the data, I don't see there being, I doubt you'll notice a major performance increase. And you might, like you alluded to, see a decrease because the server might become a bottleneck if 50 people try to do it at the same time. So one of the cardinal rules of MirrorSync is that you never share a file once it's been synced, including that initial sync. Because it will look to MirrorSync as if the same person, if you take the file that's already been synced before and you give it to 50 people, well, the first time it gets synced, an ID gets stored in the file. And I know you know this because you and I have talked about this, but I want to make this a general answer for everybody. uh, you the first time you sync it, it's going to store an ID number in the file. And once
Mhm.
that's been done, if you share that file with 50 people to MirrorSync, it looks like this is the same person, just syncing the same file from all the different devices, but they're not the same device. You know, some people are going to add records and delete records, and it's going to confuse MirrorSync really badly. And it's like, wait, I just put this record on here a second ago, and now it's not there. Um, and so you don't want to share files once they've been synced. With that said, it does seem feasible that you could do some sort of mass thing where, like, you know that at that point of initial sync, nothing has been modified yet. All of them are exactly identical to each other. Um, I will definitely add it to my notes. So I'm going to actually write this down right now while I'm talking so I don't forget. Um, but I will see. It's not such an easy problem because if there's 50 different devices, we need 50 sets of that sync data because each device needs to have
Mhm.
its own internal sync database so that they can be, independent of each other. And so there's no getting away. There's no getting around the fact that we need to set up 50 copies of the sync database, but maybe we could do something like some sort of batch operation that might be more efficient than just doing it on demand as each user runs their first initial sync. Right. And does that
Yes.
work okay? So it is still, when you do that and you tweak that MirrorSync record, it is going to actually still create that sync database for each second and third and fourth person who runs the sync. So if that's working great and that's fast for you, that's good. That tells me that it's not a bottleneck of setting up the sync data for each person. And that means that bodes well for the idea of, um, of maybe having some sort of process where you can say, give me 30 copies of this file, for instance. Michael Ross, okay, how are you handling conflict resolutions and or multiple syncs happening at the same time? So multiple syncs happening at the same time is no problem. We've actually done benchmarks. We had an intern here at 360Works, a summer intern. So his job was to set up 300 EC2 instances on Amazon that were all running a constant looping sync. And that worked great. So we had 300 actual real computers that were just nonstop, just sync, 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 sync as fast as they could, times 300 of them. And there was no problem. We didn't really try to push it to see how far we had to, before we started to get into backup. So I don't know if it would have fallen apart at 400 or 600 or 1,000, but there's certainly no problem with multiple machines syncing at the same time. Um, Conflict resolution, uh, I mean, that's always an issue. If multiple people do modify the same field in the same record, there will need to be a conflict resolution. But that's not a slowdown in terms of like MirrorSync speed. That's more just a slowdown of a human being making that decision about like which record do I want to keep or not. So they will become a bottleneck in the sense of like how long does it take them to look at the conflict resolution screen and decide on what they want to do. But there is no bottleneck in terms of just a whole bunch of people simultaneously syncing. And Scott, I think it's pretty common for you to have a lot of people syncing simultaneously, right? Here's my FileMaker server. I'm using my laptop for everything. My laptop is, um, wait, this is my FileMaker server, my client, and my MirrorSync box. So it's all happening on my laptop. And so I've got the FileMaker starting point right here. Here's the database that you saw me syncing with, fm underscore starting point underscore 25 USS underscore x2. Okay, so we've got the FM starting point database, which is the one I was syncing with. What you can do is that MirrorSync comes with a file called reporting underscore MirrorSync. And you take that file, this is something that's new in MirrorSync 7. It comes with the MirrorSync 7 download. It's an FMP12 database. You take that FMP12 database named reporting underscore MirrorSync and you rename it to whatever your database name is underscore MirrorSync. So I've named it FM starting point 25 USS X2 underscore MirrorSync. The other change that you make is that you make sure that the same username and password that you told MirrorSync for your main database, you need to make sure the same username and password exist for this underscore MirrorSync database so that MirrorSync has permissions to read and write to that file. And by doing that, you get this sync history database. And this, I should have showed this to you guys before I started running my demo because it was empty. Um, but this is every sync that we ran during the demo that we just did. Um, and actually some of these I can see were my practice sessions. I ran a bunch of syncs at 251 while I was getting all set up. And then here's the ones at 326 that I ran while you guys were all watching me. Here's the, the warning that I got when I forgot to click out of the record and commit it. Here's the conflict that I got when I resolved that conflict. Here's the success message. If I go into any of these records, it shows me the same thing on this screen that the user would have seen on their iPad or iPhone when their sync ran. So if they just clicked OK and you're like, oh, I really needed to see that, it's still going to be here in the sync database, the sync history database. This sync start ID is very helpful for us at 360Works if you want to report a problem. If you send us your log files, if you can also, if you happen to have the sync start ID or the session ID, and you send that along with it, these log files are gigantic, so it makes it a whole lot easier for us to help you if we have one of those things. So that's what the purpose of this sync start ID is. It tells you when it started and finished, tells you the name of the device that it's on. This is not the version of FileMaker server. This is the version of the MirrorSync script. The MirrorSync script on the server is version 7.0404. There were no warnings. This sync finished in 6.7 seconds. And then there's just detailed information about the hub and the spoke devices in here. There's actually, so this is a lot of data, but there's actually more data in here, which is in this raw JSON. And so this is all of the data that MirrorSync sends to it, the number of bytes that it sent, the ping time is how many milliseconds it takes to make a network trip. So there's super detailed and granular information here that gets stored for every single sync that runs. And so as the developer and as the person supporting your users, you'll now have access to see this and know everything that each user has done. So you can search by user, search by device, search by, conflicts or anything. And then the last thing I'll point out here in this reporting database is that it's totally customizable. So you can go into the script workspace, and this is the main entry point here, this store sync history. This is the data, this is the script that our code calls to create a new script, and it passes in the JSON data as a script parameter, and we store that in the raw data field. And then we run this parsing script to just extract all the data from that and stick it in the appropriate fields in FileMaker. Well, the cool thing is you can stick your own code here. So you can take any action that you want after any given sync happens based on what gets put in those parsed fields. So if you want to say, for instance, let's say that you want to be notified anytime that a record gets deleted from an activity table, or just any records happen on the hub. You could just have an if statement right here, and you could say if deletion count is greater than 0, then use FileMaker's built-in email to send me an email letting me know that. Or if the user's sync took longer than 5 minutes, send myself an email so I can ask them if there's something unusual. Maybe I need to get helps from 360Works, taking a look at my logs and figure out why it took so long. Anything that you want to see here, you can add your own code to send yourself notifications or take any other action that you want to take there. So that's the new reporting database. And I would have totally forgotten to show that if it hadn't been for Stephen asking me the question. So Stephen, thank you for asking the question. I'm a little rusty on doing my demo, so that was I would have hated to have skipped over that. So thank you for asking. I'm not sure. I don't want. I consider that as yes. I know that it works for FileMaker Pro, Go to FileMaker Server, and I know it works for FileMaker Server, FileMaker Server. I need to check and get you an answer on that because I don't remember the code in my head right now exactly, but I will make myself a note to get you an answer on that. Yeah, I think it'll help a lot because we get tech support requests all the time. My user tried to sync and they failed. I'm like, what was the error? I don't remember. When did it happen? I'm not sure. Send me your logs and I'll just look for something unusual. So I think, I'm very happy about it selfishly because I think it'll make my support tickets be much faster and easier to resolve. I'm curious who's going to the full access conference. I know I'm going to be there, and I think they're using. Last time I checked, I think they were planning on using MirrorSync for the conference app.
Oh, good. Stephen will be there, he says.
Cool.
Yeah,
Stephen, I'll get to see you in person there.
Thank you, Jesse, for spending your afternoon with us again and going through your presentation.
Great.
I know it's MirrorSync has been a great help for our projects, and we're looking at more ways to use it and proposing it to other clients. And so it's good. We're doing that with better forms, and so it's nice to have these reliable applications that we know work and we know
Yes.
what they can do, and then get to be part of putting them in place. It's been really nice.
Thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you're welcome. All right, well, we'll close out then. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See
See
y'all
you
Good
soon.
again.
job.